The best possible partners are people who have a North Star. His is always doing the right thing. Whatever it is, doing the right thing for people, for the deal, for New York, informs everything about him. Attended industry association functions and met the president of industry, usually a older, chatty guy. I saw the architects that were very active and spent time with them, and the engineers. I tried to talk to some of the tenant brokers, and ultimately, we felt enough conviction to find our first site and obtain financing. And so we built the first one on spec, and Amazon came and they rented it.
Adam Gordon, welcome to the Broker Brunch.
Thank you for having me.
We like to ask a few easy questions to get started. So if you were explaining what you do to a 5-year-old, what would you say you do for a living?
Well, I deal with a lot of brokers, so that's kind of appropriate.
No offense taken.
No, I'm a real estate developer in the city, focusing on urban infrastructure, which is really two things. One is creating frictionless commerce, right? Especially at the leading edge, because things are always changing. And the second is doing things which attract and hold people to the city and make it interesting, vibrant, and diverse. So everything we do really falls into those two buckets.
Bear in mind, I'm a 5-year-old asking you what you do.
Yeah, so, I've been doing versions of that, evolving our business to make it interesting for me and hopefully useful for others since I got out of school in 1986.
Right before we were born.
So you started as a luxury residential developer, is that correct?
I started, when I got out of Wharton, I got some fundamental experience at a company called Trammell Crow. At that time, they were the largest developer in the country, in New York and down in their headquarters in Dallas. And then I spent 2 years at a now defunct investment bank called Bear Stearns in real estate. And then the first thing I did when I went off on my own, because I was a miserable banker and really not very capable at it, was factory outlet stores in Manchester, Vermont. So it was kind of just the rise where the shoemakers in Maine would have some extra shoes or out-of-season merchandise or LL Bean, and they began to figure out that tourists would come up and they would spend a lot of money buying things because they were on the weekend and kind of in the mood. And so this whole kingdom started. The most active factory outlet store in America for Ralph Lauren was in Manchester, Vermont, 203 miles north of New York City, in the middle of nowhere, right by Stratton Mountain. And so I saw that happening, and so I started converting local retail stores to factory outlets. That was the beginning.
Interesting. I'm friends with one of your former co-workers, and he mentioned that you have a Wagyu farm, and you also have a equestrian, you like horses as well.
I raise Japanese Wagyu beef for local restaurants in Northern California. So we've got a ranch out there, and
Sonoma? Is that
in Sonoma?
Sonoma.
Yeah,
Okay.
Knights Valley, which is between Calistoga and Healdsburg in Sonoma County, about an hour and 45 minutes north of San Francisco Airport. And we were looking for some way to help the local food community. And one of the restaurants that my wife's firm designed is called Single Threads, became later top 50 restaurants in the world. And he said everything comes from within 40 miles of Healdsburg, except for two things: small amount of fish, because you're not on the coast, and Japanese Wagyu beef flown at great expense from Tokyo once a week. So I told him I really didn't understand it, because California is like Eden. Everything grows there. And he said you just couldn't get reliable supply. So that kind of started me down a little rabbit hole. And I got championship Wagyu genetics, and I got a Wagyu nutritionist named Jimmy from Texas. And one of my buddies, it turned out, grew up raising cattle. And we started Knights Valley Wagyu. And 2 years into the project, we had a blind tasting of our Wagyu, Japanese A5 Wagyu, the American Wagyu and Australian Wagyu, and in a blind tasting, the chefs liked ours the best. And they went on Instagram, and that was our business. We only sell to chefs within bicycling distance of the ranch. We want it to be hyper local. The chefs have to work in the kitchen, and they have to be cool. Those are our three criteria.
How do you determine someone that's cool? Just so we get a feeling for it. Have a
I
British
think
accent.
they say it's,
Yeah.
it's kind of like porn. You know it when you see it.
So over in Sonoma, that's like a big difference to developing condos in New York City. How did you come into the idea of doing a farm and Wagyu beef out in California?
Sometimes you travel someplace and you want to go back, whatever that place is for you. For me, it was California. I'm a car nut, and I literally would stash an old 911 by the airport and go pick it up. And my wife and I would spend, 3, 4, 5 days cruising around. And then I really wanted to be a marine biologist or a field ecologist. And so I got myself on the director's cabinet, which is like the board of directors at Scripps Institution of Oceanography in La Jolla. And so between the cars and the vacations and Scripps, I found myself in California a lot. And my wife grew up in Northern California as well. So we decided to get a place there. So we bought a working cattle ranch right as we were coming out of the recession and nobody was buying any land. So we bought 227 acres of paradise.
That's awesome. I was actually in Napa Valley about 2 months ago. My brother lives in San Francisco, and we went up through Sonoma and into Napa Valley for a day. Unbelievable countryside.
Yeah.
I mean, I was blown away.
Really beautiful. We always have this experience there because I'm a New Yorker and I love New York. It's very transactional, which is what we love about it. But I go to Sonoma and I'm sitting there and someone starts talking to me, and the New Yorker in me is kind of going, what do they want? I go, what is there going to be an ask or an offer? They're going to sell me something. And I realize they're just connecting. And that's the beginning of like the decompression of going to California.
I met my wife in San Francisco. So it has a special place in my heart. And I remember growing up in the UK, and the TV, the adverts would be the California Dream. You think, wow, this place is amazing. Everyone's surfing. It's really cool. So I did dream of moving there one day, maybe later in life. Who knows? But it's definitely a cool place.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the promises I had to make my wife before we decided to buy a place that I wouldn't do business there, because when we go there now, and we're going there tomorrow for a week, I take my business helmet off and we just go to play.
Nice.
Get in a car, have some meals, and just experience. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth.
That's awesome. You're lucky to get to do that. You hit on something interesting there a few minutes ago regarding Bear Stearns. What was it like working at Bear Stearns back in its heyday?
Well, I say this not with any false humility. I was a terrible banker. I didn't have the capacity to tell people something I didn't believe in. I'm not great at making books. My boss would rather eat alone at his desk than sit down with us and hang out and, schmooze a little. And it was vile.
Really? Would there be lessons there that you took from it that you carried on into your career after it? Do you think there was any like positive, or not even positive, but just life lessons that helped you out?
Listen, I think you learn a lot by negativity. I certainly learned, a piece of how the capital markets work, how lenders and investors look at deals. That's useful, how to make books, how to model. So there were skills there, but it's at a cost. You don't find a lot of old bankers, right? You see somebody, it's like dog years. You see a banker who's 45 and he's 2 marriages down and he hates everything. And all he can talk about is his house in Wainscott because he's so miserable. It's not a life for me.
Yeah, that didn't really appeal to you. I actually spent some time at JP Morgan before I got into real estate.
Yeah.
And I had a similar type of experience where it just felt like this was, life is short. There's got to be other things to do with it. And,
That's it.
And I don't know about you, but that's what got me into real estate. It just seemed to have every discipline all wound up into one business. So from sales to marketing to negotiating to the financial side of it, it really just encompasses, I would say, 10 different disciplines into one. And I think that's what really spoke to me about real estate. And because I had no money and no connections, I became a broker. And I feel like a lot of folks still use that as a way of getting their foot in the door in the industry. It's typically a low barrier to entry business, but it's hard to rise the ranks in it. And just because of the attritional nature of it. Did you have a similar viewpoint on real estate, or what end of the business did you enter it at? Thanks for listening to the Broker Brunch. We've now brought you a ton of episodes and we hope we're providing a lot of value. If you have any ideas of people you'd like to see on future episodes, please drop it in the comments so we can make it happen.
Nearly identical. I had no money and no connections. Even though I was born in New York, I grew up in Ohio. So I had precisely no head start other than a reasonable education. But I just found I connected with it. Like you could do design, you can do zoning, you can negotiate, you can finance. It's just a very interdisciplinary world. And for me, because I've been involved in a number of different aspects of business, in real estate, it's constantly new and changing. So I have found it endlessly stimulating. And a lot of people talk about retirement, but I don't see that, as a goal. Ultimately, I'd like to turn my company over to the next generation of leadership. But in terms of my own activities, I always see myself being involved in it one way or another.
So talking about your company, Wildflower, so you are in many different spaces. You're in EV charging, film studio, you've done some storage business. You were an early pioneer in building, I think, 10 facilities for Amazon. How did that initial opportunity come about? I imagine there was a lot of people chomping at the bit to get that business.
We were, quite active in the self-storage business, building under the Public Storage, CubeSmart, Extra Space, Storage USA names in New York City. And storage got outlawed. And we thought, this is kind of a moment for us. And I'd been doing a lot of research on the rise of e-commerce in other markets, but the modern e-commerce warehouse, high-performance warehouse, hadn't yet become kind of a building type in New York City. So I just did a tremendous amount of research, like I always do. And none of it's mysterious, and I'm always happy to talk about it. I attended industry association functions and met the president of industry, who's usually a older, chatty guy. I saw the architects that were very active and spent time with them, and the engineers. I tried to talk to some of the tenant brokers. And ultimately, we felt enough conviction to find our first site and obtain financing. And so we built the first one on spec, and Amazon came and they rented it. And then we kept going from there. I handle all our leasing because I want to stay close to demand. And so one important skill is the product market fit of seeing where demand is. But then the second part is to understand when demand is changing or ebbing. And so after we did 10 deals with Amazon, it became very clear to me that they'd had a full meal and demand was pretty satiated and that they were going to be slowing down. And so when that happened, we stopped doing it, even though we had myriad opportunities to keep going. And I think for me, that was because I wasn't filtering information through brokers or anybody else. I was really talking directly to the tenants, and it was obvious that Amazon was not going to keep going with the kind of velocity that they had in the past.
What was the reason for that?
Amazon became the biggest space occupier in the United States in history. And in a matter of a couple years, especially, during COVID when people were hiding under the covers, they built a delivery infrastructure that took FedEx and UPS decades, and they did it in a couple of years and arguably better. But then they had enough, and they built out for the future, and so they had excess capacity, and then for them it became a matter of absorbing what they have. And so you see them kind of filling in, and they have some specialty products. They have one called right now SSD, sub same day delivery, which means I need my toothbrush in 2 hours, right?
Which is a scary concept. I mean, I look at some of this when I'm ordering, like you said, a toothbrush or something like so mundane, and you can literally get it that day.
Yeah, and the question is, and you sort of think about it for a minute, it's like, do I really need it today?
I feel kind of almost bad
Right.
insisting on it that day.
Do I? Or
At what cost?
At what cost? Yeah.
Like, I don't mean the money, I just mean at what cost to the environment.
Sure.
That to
Yeah,
get it
can
to
I
me.
wait 2 days? But Amazon has retrained your brain to say we need everything now. We need the biggest selection, the lowest prices, and speed now with real urgency.
I'm sure you can appreciate by spending time with the Amazon folks how intelligent and smart they are and how forward thinking they are.
Oh, brilliant. It's totally brilliant. They have an enormous research department, and just like one of the firms I really look up to in my business is Prologis. A huge research department. They publish a tremendous amount. And I learned, especially early on when I was just trying to figure the business out, it's all out there if you want to read it and pay attention.
Yeah, you really have to have that thirst for knowledge, don't you? I feel like intellectual curiosity is something that really separates people who, hang around the periphery and who actually get into the weeds.
Yes.
I find that trying to get into the weeds, even though all the information is there, and even now with AI and ChatGPT, like, you could get the information, but it takes real discipline to actually sit down, make the headspace for learning, not doing, learning.
It's 20 or 25% of my day.
Really?
Every day I'm sitting there learning, trying to figure things out, because I'm not Nostradamus. I'm not, some crazy genius. But I am rapidly curious, right? And so I'm always thinking about how to learn and grow, just because it's my default setting.
And I think you do something that's very unusual in terms of handling the leasing yourself. You say to stay close to demand. That's a very, very smart, I feel like, way of looking at it. And I think probably causes you a lot more work, I'm sure, and causes you a lot more of your time that you have to give to something. But I'm sure you get a lot from that in terms of that real-time data from tenants of what's going on in the space. And I don't know if many CEOs or developers are really that hands-on when it comes to that part of the business.
No, and it's also, for me, being right size for me, maybe not for everybody, but we're 3.5 million square feet. We've sold a lot, so we're, I don't know, X billion dollars, but we're 10 people, and I'd rather have 10 superstars than 50 okay people and 1 or 2 superstars. Have fewer people, get more involved, but I also know what I get paid for. We're 17 jobs in a row, on time, on budget. So our execution capabilities are tremendous. We have a great team. So we focus on, hopefully, on what's important and a lot less on, what's at the periphery. So I don't really attend any real estate events. I don't find that I learn anything. If I'm going to meet brokers, it's going to be one-on-one and have coffee, right? Get together and get to know them and really talk about what they're seeing in the market. And for me, it's also trying to understand and ask the right questions and spend, and I'm talking now, but in general, spending more time listening than talking.
Really good advice.
So what is the state of the industrial and logistics market now? I feel like it's slowed down maybe a little. That's what I hear. You know better than me in terms of where demand is at. I think there was a lot of supply with a lot of multi-story industrial buildings built. I think there's still some vacancy. So where's your feeling at where we're in the cycle for that sector?
It's a few things. I think, let me first say, we're experts in New York, but that means nothing anywhere else. So we're not in New Jersey, we're not in Pennsylvania, we're not in Texas. So what I'm going to say is going to be very New York specific. The first is there is a lack of product market fit. The only problem with multi-story is tenants don't like it. Now, had developers had those conversations with tenants, they would have told you. If you talk to the leasing people from Amazon, they would have said, we don't like multi-story. But it was built because bigger development fees and take a big site and you just max it out. But max it out is not necessarily the way to make it most profitable. So it's not that demand isn't there. It's just that a number of people have built what tenants don't want. The second piece is that New York City will ultimately likely ban modern e-commerce warehouses. They banned a lot of hotels in the boroughs. They banned a lot of storage in the boroughs. E-commerce warehouses are the next target. When that happens, there aren't going to be any more. So the group of modern high-performance warehouses that are there are going to become extremely valuable. But expansion in this environment has been slower for people because interest rates are high and there's been a lot of economic uncertainty. What will 2025 bring? No one knows. But we have seen since the inauguration a serious uptick in activity where people are ready to make commitments again. There seems to be a lot less uncertainty in the market.
Why do you think they're going to ban New York City, the logistics space? I'm involved in the REBNY Industrial Committee, and they've been talking about this recently. So like, it seems like they're going to stop that sector being built. Why do you think they would?
Is it
do
a
that?
function of it's not providing housing? Is that the reason? And it's just taking a lot of land that doesn't really help the housing situation?
It's a couple things. I mean, in the storage business, we were guilty. And so there were kind of like 3 generations of storage. Generation number 1 is you would find storage through the yellow pages. Maybe it was even before your guys' time, but there'd be a big fat telephone book next to the phone. And when you go storage, you would open it up. And the guys who were in the front pages tended to get most of the calls, right? Because you never got to the 3rd or 4th page. Then the second generation of storage was building as billboard. So the buildings would be in highly visible locations, and they would be red, white, blue, yellow, or green, but they would be these really garish buildings with their phone numbers on there, so that when you thought about storage, you would think about public storage, right? Then the third generation happened, which is storage on your phone, right? Storage on the internet. And the problem is when we got to the 3rd phase, we forgot that we didn't need the 2nd phase anymore. We kept building these really ugly buildings that were offensive, and they looked like they were everywhere because when you go by them, they're the worst looking buildings you could see. And because of that, a lot of people living near them got offended, and they talked to politicians and they said, we don't want any more of these things because they're such a blight. I think e-commerce is slightly different. E-commerce is a vital service, right? In COVID, if you needed drugs, right? If you need, with all of the shoplifting, pharmacies have closed. If you need anything that you would get from a pharmacy, we need these modern e-commerce warehouses. But unfortunately, a lot of people who are adversely impacted by those e-commerce warehouses and the traffic they create have gone to their local representatives, and it's become a political challenge. And so because of that, I think it's very probable we're going to see those being outlawed very soon. And look, the tenants are really smart. So for example, Amazon HQ2 got turned down in Long Island City. What happened? They moved to Manhattan. No one's talked about it, but Amazon occupies a massive amount of space in Manhattan. If the major delivery warehouses get shut down, which again, I think they will in the boroughs, Amazon has these micro mobility warehouses. I don't know if you've seen the little bikes that have, it almost looks like little package vans on the back of bicycles. You start to see them all around Manhattan. Amazon will move to those and have micro hubs. So they're going to keep maneuvering to be successful. So I have every confidence that they'll find the right solutions in spite of whatever happens in zoning. So none of these actions by city council are going to be fatal.
Was the Long Island City, so was that net a good thing or a bad thing for New York City? If I asked that because if Amazon ended up coming here anyway, I think at the time we were offering a lot of abatements and tax incentives, right, to come and set up in Long Island City. And I think the counter to the argument was, why are we giving Amazon, why are we giving them so much for free? So did New York City end up actually winning in the end because Amazon came and found a way here anyway and probably just did it the old-fashioned way without any incentives?
Manhattan probably won. Queens absolutely lost. New York City overall probably lost. And for a really simple reason. There's a part of development called community relations, and it's really simple, and it's pretty universal. When you come to somebody's neighborhood, you got to come with respect. Bring flowers, bring candy, bring a pie, talk to people, tell them what you're going to do, and listen. And Amazon HQ2, when they came in with de Blasio, who was a certified idiot, they didn't bother to talk to anyone. They just said, hey, you're going to take it. And that's not something you say anywhere. Certainly don't say it to New Yorkers. And so they got what they deserved.
So it's kind of a PR mishandling of a PR situation.
Exactly.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Unfortunately, it went down the way it did. And I agree with you. I think Queens probably lost out. A lot of jobs there, you would imagine, for
tremendous jobs and housing and workforce. And Amazon was an amazing company and employer, but it was just mishandled politically to everyone's detriment. It was, a lot of unnecessary drama for Amazon too.
So you've just been involved in another transaction with another big company, Tesla.
Yes.
It was an EV charging station you sold to them in Queens?
Yes. So think about New York City and how different it is than any place else. And again, we're active in creating electric vehicle charging in New York. If you were to go to New Jersey, they have supermarket parking lots and you can charge there. They have hotel parking lots. They have public libraries. They have big gas stations all over the place. They've got pharmacies. All of them have parking lots. New York City doesn't have any of these things. So
That's why you want to buy parking lots.
public electric vehicle charging is the key. The only way we're going to have an energy transition, we're going to have electric vehicles, not only consumer cars and trucks, but also fleet delivery vehicles. So we don't have pollution exhaust. We have these very advanced engines, is going to be with public electric vehicle charging. So we started doing that with Amazon. We've continued doing it. We had a wonderful site in Maspeth. We brought power in, we prepared it, and then we sold it to Tesla. They're building their first supercharger center there
Wow, great.
on that site.
Can you share any of your experience from negotiating that with Tesla? How was it to work with them?
What's Elon Musk like?
What's Elon like?
I don't think that we had any interactions. Look, I'm an enormous fan of Tesla and Elon Musk and everything he's done for the planet. So I'll start there. What I would say that was kind of interesting is 7 months in, the deal was stalled. And so what did I do? I went on LinkedIn and I connected with LinkedIn Premium to 5 Tesla people. One of the guys texted me back, and it turned out he was the New York City regional guy who I could never get to because the brokers were stiff-arming me, even though they were protected and we wanted to get in and talk to Tesla to try to get a deal done. But once I spoke with him and once we met on LinkedIn and we had coffee together, he's a super guy, the deal started moving forward. And so this idea that you outgrow the basics, for me, has not been the case. I'm still reaching out on LinkedIn. Most people are still not returning, my reach outs or responding to me, but enough do that it's worthwhile.
As a broker, I feel like we're super paranoid, right, about deals blowing up, and we try to manage the process between sellers and buyers. But that was like an exception to the rule there. You getting together with the principal, having coffee, showing them that you were a person too, seemed to unstick the deal and got things moving again. How would you advise brokers, right, we're brokers, a lot of brokers listen to this, what's the best way to push a deal forward when it gets stuck like that?
I understand from a broker's perspective, certain clients are not ready for prime time. Either
that's a nice way of putting it.
Right. Either they can't handle themselves or the situation, or maybe they're not trustworthy. But if you have, as most clients are, you have a good client acting good faith, you've got an agreement, so everybody's protected. I think encouraging people to get together and negotiate a deal again, so there's fewer people in the middle, is always helpful. One of the strategies that I have is I realize that Tesla and everybody else, Amazon, they've got a desk full of deals. They're going to do not only the ones that are most important, but the ones that are easiest. So I'm going to try to be the most frictionless, like user-friendly guy out there.
You remind me of a client we worked with last year who was very much similar to you, very hands-on, and it did help the transaction just because he was there, he was present, he wanted to get it done, direct communication with us involved. Yeah, I think it takes a certain type of person to do that.
There is, and look, brokers are our lifeblood. We take care of brokers, and they take care of us. We like and respect so many brokers in the community. It's a collaboration, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of the national rep brokers come in with a real paranoia, and it doesn't benefit the deal. The national guys often don't understand how different New York is. And so they complain about price. They complain they can't get exactly the spec they want, but that's New York, right? And so trying to collaborate and work together benefits the client the most.
What would you say from your experience working with brokers are some of the common successful character traits of the good brokers that you like?
the good brokers do their homework.
Mm.
They make sure they're staying close to me, meaning we're going to be talking every week, every 2 weeks. We're going to get together, have a coffee, have a breakfast, have a lunch, have a personal relationship, because business is always subject to interpretation, right? You know, language isn't perfect. Everybody has a bad day. But if you have a kind of a reservoir of friendship to build on, it just can soften all the edges all the way around.
Makes it so much easier.
It's so much easier. It's so much more fun.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So I think the first thing is we're staying close to one another. The second thing is they're doing their homework. So they understand our site. They understand the tenant. They understand the deal. So they're doing their homework. And they also understand the competitive landscape, right? Because a tenant is choosing between options. So you've got to understand all that. There's some great brokers out there, you know, Helen, Paul, and Rico Murtha, people we work with a lot. I've done a ton with David Junick. You know, there's a lot of good brokers. They all have that in common. Andreas is a spectacular broker.
Andreas at Ripco, he's somebody you work with.
Stephen,
Stephen,
very good brokers.
Yeah. Thinking of, just since you brought those guys up, they're guys that really have, I feel like, learned their space. They're experts in what they do, and they've built a business for themselves the proper way by, you know, having layers in the business. Everybody seems to know their role.
Yeah.
Mitchell and I have worked with the guys on several deals, and we're always impressed by how smooth things run and how everybody knows what their job is. Because in a world where we're all trying to push things forward and get from A to B and get the job done, but sometimes it's just like people running around with their heads cut off, you know. It's because it's no one knows what they're doing, and we've had experience of this trying to build our own team. Do we have guys stay in their lane and just turn the screw on the job they're supposed to be doing and probably bore them to tears by just doing the same thing over and over? In our case, we'll be like, just keep calling. And then the next person's job is to put the book together. And then the next person's job is to pitch the deal. And it's all these little parts. And it reminds me of, you know, if you're to think of McDonald's on the assembly line, you know, one guy is toasting the bun, one guy is
the speedy system,
the ketchup, right? And it's like everything runs beautifully, but it's also, I feel like, personally, I just feel like when I'm trying to build a team like that, it almost dampens creativity. Because people are trained, like, don't think outside the job you're doing. And for me, I don't like that. So I'm always impressed when I see teams like Stephen Bruce's team and Andreas, where they've built a very robust team full of smart guys doing very good jobs. I'm like, how do you do that? How do you get a business to work like that, where everybody is fulfilled but everybody is effective? Thank you for listening to the Broker Brunch. If you enjoy the show, please hit subscribe so we can reach more people.
Yeah, we tend to sit down. Or development, finance, strategy, acquisitions, we'll sit down and talk about deals to make sure that we're talking about them through those lenses. We're also yes and people. There's a lot of no people. And yes, and like, I have a building, I'm going to try to figure it out. Like, there's no perfect prototype. So maybe we need some dock doors, or maybe we need to create an office or whatever. Like, yes, as long as zoning allows us to do it, let's figure out a way to do it together. And I think it's kind of getting in that problem-solving mindset for brokers. The best negotiating book ever is called Getting to Yes. Like, when I come into a negotiation, I know what I need to get out of it, but what I'm focused on in the negotiation is trying to understand what the other side needs. And oftentimes it's not what they're telling me. So I'm trying to kind of like tease it out of them, you know, with good questions, and then try to figure out what those points of collaboration are.
Interesting. What are some ways you do that?
The first thing I'm really trying to do is be open with people and let them know I'm a human being, because a lot of people come in, and especially in New York, they're very guarded.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just a guy out there doing some things. Right.
If you give first, I've learned reciprocity kicks in pretty quickly.
Yeah. It's a basic human instinct.
So by laying something out on the table, you know, in a negotiation, it might be a softball, right? But by throwing it out there, I have found similar things that it gets the other side. Okay, you threw that out, I'll throw this out.
Sure.
And sometimes it might be like giving away something, right? That is not material to you, but could be helpful to them. So rather than them having to bludgeon you, to get something, if you offer it up front, I find then they fire something back over. All of a sudden now you have a dialogue, a rhythm.
Yes.
But
And you've got to know when enough is enough. You can't have it all. You
Yeah,
end up
negotiate
trying to
is
have it
cool.
all. You just don't end up doing very much. When I first got out of school and went out on my own, I was like, I wanted the perfect deal because I was still in love with my calculator. And then over time, I kind of realized, well, that's great, but I could have done a lot more if I just been a little softer, given a lot more, maybe been a little more mature. And so now I know what I need. But if I can achieve what I need, then I'm just trying to be as helpful as possible. And I tell people, like I always say, and it sounds very non-New York, but I always say, how can I help you? And I mean it. And oftentimes we won't do a deal with somebody this time, next time, but we'll have built a rapport so that the third time when it comes around, we all feel comfortable with one another.
yeah, negotiating is a fascinating
Yeah,
art, right? Have you read Chris Voss's The FBI Negotiator?
I have.
So he actually takes the opposite side of you're getting to yes. He's like, until someone says no, they can't relax. So it's like in his case, it's his advice was, if you're calling somebody, this kind of struck a chord with me. If you're calling somebody, ask them, instead of saying, is now a good time. So in Sales 101, we're taught, get the client saying yes, because they'll get used to saying yes, and then yes becomes easier. But because people are so sophisticated now, and we've all read the same books and learned the same way, the quicker they can say no, the quicker their brain relaxes a little bit. So they've got that no out. So when I call somebody now, instead of saying, I used to say, hey, is now a good time? I say, hey, is now a bad time? And then because they almost just want to disagree with you, they go, no. I'm like, great, okay. So we talk for a minute, and then I kind of have them. And I've noticed that them saying no, actually, they've given you the rejection, but it's not a real rejection. So now you've actually satisfied their need to say no, and you can move on.
And a lot of people we're negotiating with, when we think about sellers, this is their biggest asset. And we think, because their asset may be worth tens of millions of dollars, that they're super sophisticated. They may never have negotiated anything before, maybe selling doors or garbage or whatever business they're in, but we're negotiating real estate deals all day long, all day, every week, every month, every year. This is their one and only. And so they're coming in primed, feeling a little under attack and a little insecure. And it's our job to make them comfortable, right? And the same thing when brokers come from out of town and tenants come from out of town, they assume that we're all sharks, right? That we're pirates. And they may be right sometimes, but I think it's worth kind of putting ourselves in their head for a moment and understanding, what they're going through, and try to make them a little more at ease.
In that instance, we do a lot of mum and pop clients, and we sell to institutional buyers. And I think in that instance, it's an emotional process. And I think that you've just to hit them with the facts. What are the relevant comparables, and what is the market saying right now? Because they don't know. They're making a decision based on what you're telling them. So I feel like if you have something that's a fact, you can't disagree with the fact. It's not an opinion. So I feel like in negotiating with them, that's been useful. Just to remind them. And you can only know that if you have knowledge of the market and understanding, okay, is it $100 a foot, but why is it $100 a foot? Was there anything behind it? So you can only get that knowledge by understanding the market.
And that's the nuance too, because a lot of what we're getting now is people saying, well, I turned down X 4 years ago. Like, interest rates were 3%.
Oh, we hear that all the time.
I'm so bored of that.
Yeah, I know. So am I. It's not a good answer.
It's not a good answer.
But it's human nature, isn't it? And I feel like it's easy for me to say I'm bored by that answer, but I'm sure if someone offered me $5 million for my house a few years ago, I'd remember it too, and it would really stick in my head.
Yeah.
So I think unraveling that and letting them know that is tough, that this happened, and it is tough that maybe that was an opportunity that you missed, but getting them focused then on what's the next opportunity. How do you not miss the opportunity in front of you today?
Sure.
I feel like that's helpful too in terms of being a therapist for them and helping them get unstuck in their thinking.
So that's a type we haven't spoke about is what you're involved in is film studios.
Right.
One of your partners, I hope I can say his name, Robert De Niro.
You just did?
Yes, I
Yeah.
just did. So how is that sector going? Like, I don't know much about the space. I'm curious to learn, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I think that business came about, as I was saying in the beginning, trying to attract and hold the kind of people that make New York City interesting. So, not speaking for my partner, but he has contributed to life in New York in so many ways over a half a century, whether it's Tribeca Film Festival, his life and work, the beginnings of Nobu, the Greenwich Hotel. He is someone who has constantly given back. And one of the things I'll say about him is the best possible partners are people who have a North Star. His is always doing the right thing. Whatever it is, doing the right thing for people, for the deal, for New York, informs everything about him. So it's very easy for me. And when we thought about trying to create a permanent home for artists to tell their stories, we each brought something new to the table. He had all those relationships and all that history, and I had a curiosity about learning new things and trying to figure it out, and a combination of what we call now performance meets poetry. Performance like a high performance warehouse specifications, and the poetry is beautiful and fun and hospitable. And so we went through each piece of the business, because film production's a business, right? Hair, makeup, lighting, wardrobe, costume, grip. And to think about it very forensically, like, what are the space needs? How do you think about it? Like makeup, what temperature lighting do you want? And how big of a table do you want for makeup when you're unrolling it? And where do you want the electrical outlets? And all of it seems kind of dull, but it isn't. If you just kind of get curious. And out of that kind of soup came Wildflower Studios. So it's the first vertical production studio in the world. So we went up with levels of sound stages, but it's an immersive campus where not only is it more efficient to produce TV than anywhere else in the world, but we think arguably the most fun. Great food, it's cool, beautiful, and so that's been a joy. And so we're in lease up now.
Cool.
That's certainly a niche business, right? I feel like you don't meet too many folks going into it. Do you see it being a profitable business?
Boy, I hope so.
Do I have to ask you in a few years?
How many production studios are in New York? New York, like film.
Oh gosh, there's probably a half a dozen majors.
Okay.
There's some very good studios, Steiner Studio, and ours would probably be at the top. And then you've got York and Silvercup and Kaufman. And then there's a wonderful fellow named Tony Argento, who owns a lot of kind of like the more basic stages, which occupy a really important position in the market for the lower budget productions. But it's all part of an ecosystem, because New York's a wonderful place to shoot. A lot of talent lives
A lot
here.
of iconic images as well around the city, right?
Yeah, and it's been amazing for me. It's like, take the opposite side, like Washington, where it's all about politics. New York is so diverse. So I got into this business 4 or 5 years ago, and I've met hundreds of people who I never would have encountered who've been here the whole time, right? They grew up in film and TV, and you'd never confront them. But it's been really cool.
So in terms of what's next for Wildflower? What does this year look like? What does the next 5 years look like in your vision for what the company will grow to?
Well, I think the headline is that I want to grow the next generation of leadership for Wildflower. So I am the opposite of a family dynasty. I want to have the next group of the most talented people run and create value in New York City and maybe elsewhere in the next generation. So that's been kind of the headline goal. That said, my older son Wes joined recently, and he's really talented. He came out of clean energy transition banking at Jefferies and Citi, so he understands not only the numbers but also why it's compelling to think about the energy transition. And there are always problems to solve. I think that we have a housing crisis, so we may turn our attention there. We have a graying of America, a huge transfer of wealth, and we have extreme climate, which means that housing and infrastructure needs to be rethought in novel ways. So, we'll probably attack one or two ideas at a time and see where it takes us.
Those are some big goals.
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting to see what you do, and thanks for coming on today. It's been great.
Definitely the smoothest voice we've ever had on the Broker Brunch.
voice.
So
Sure.
this was it was our pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers.